Hey everybody, welcome inside TCO Performance Center. Matthew Coller here, along with a first-time guest of the show. From the Star Tribune, Emily Leiker is here. And Emily, your first assignment is to break down a pre-draft press conference. I'm going to say it's the most challenging press conference to break down of all press conferences all year long, because we try to figure out, who are you drafting? And Kwesi tries to go, I'm not going to tell you. And that's a lot of what we had today. So how we doing? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for being gracious enough to let me get my bearings a little bit more first before subjecting me to the hot takes I'm sure you're about to throw my way.
That, in the other room, Alec Lewis has been trying to scare Emily. Oh, he's going to make you make predictions. And he's right about that, because the press conference did not, I would say, yield us a bunch of headlines. Now, I know the newspaper, the Star Tribune, will have some tomorrow with your breakdowns, but it's not like Kwesi revealed who they're going to draft. Darn, that's 10 years in a row of me covering the team where they haven't told us who they were going to pick. But I will say, though, that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's conversation about whether to trade down is pretty interesting to talk about. So why don't we start there? Do you think the Vikings should trade down in this draft?
I think it's so dependent on who's on the board when it gets to them. I think I'm increasingly leaning towards seeing a trade down, just because some of the guys that I felt were really good fits for them are being mocked higher and higher and just going to other teams. So I think even if they can get one more pick and go up to 5 picks instead of 4, considering some of the needs and just general positional fill out they need to do. Maybe it's not a need, as we talked about with him at tight end a little bit today, but they do need another man on the roster. I think it would be nice. So I'm leaning more towards seeing that happening for them and them trading down. I'm not 100% sold on it yet, I think.
Okay, it is called a want, we were told, and
Yes.
not a need. So from now on, we'll say they have a want at left guard rather than a need. I'm just kidding. But yeah, the math on that is what really fascinates me when it comes to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, because you hire a general manager with a background in research and in analytics and all those things, and his job is to value what each one of these assets is worth. So whether that's a free agent and putting a number on it, or whether it's a draft pick. And what it comes down to, it sounds like to me, is if there's a guy there that we think is completely worth it, we're going to take him. And he said something like, you better be sure there's 24 players that you could stand up and cheer for. And I think in this draft, there's probably 43 players that we would say, wow, the Vikings did really well there. And I watched last night the 2020 draft back, and I was watching it for Justin Jefferson's drop, and just to remember that, because it's been a while, 5 years since that happened. But I did notice something else. In that draft, the New England Patriots traded down from 23 to 37, and they picked up an additional third-round pick. Is that enough? I think that's really the question is it enough? Because I don't think that trading from 24 into the mid-second is going to get you some sort of huge amount of draft picks. But if you could pick up one extra third, is that enough to sacrifice going from 24 back?
I think so. If you're getting that early second round, like you just said, like around the 37 range, and then something earlier than that comp pick at 97, because right now they have the 24th pick, and then they're going to go pretty much all of day 2 until the very end, and then get that last pick and then be fine until Saturday. And selfishly, I want a little bit more action, so we have a little bit more to do on Saturday, and we're not just sitting around. Now, I guess the trade-off for action on Friday for us is that Thursday night they make us sit around and then trade away at 24. But I think it would be, like I said, I think just even getting from 4 to 5 makes a difference here, and there are enough positions that are deep this year that the Vikings have wants at that I think it would make sense.
Yeah, I guess I go back and forth because I look at the potential game-changing players that could be there at 24. And they also have to have a sense for how the rest of the board is going to fall. But I look at a player like Malachi Starks or defensive tackle like Walter Nolan or Derek Harmon as somebody that is probably not going to get too far out of the first round. There's a lot of other players that you could see it happening for, like a Tyler Booker or a Gray Zabel on the interior. But can they really get like a Derek Harmon, a potential pass rushing defensive tackle freak who had one of the best pass rush win rates in college football last year, can you get that guy in the second round? I think the answer is probably no. So it doesn't just come down to, we say, is it a game changer or try to get more picks? And I agree. I want more picks as well. But it also is, if it's certain positions, and this did ping in my mind a little bit when he said it's also about scarcity and how hard it is to replace certain positions. So if it's those, then they might just stick and pick.
Can I toss a question back your way?
Absolutely.
Is that allowed?
That is allowed on this show.
What do you think is at the top of their want list right now?
Okay. Let's draft what we think are their wants. We'll go back and forth.
Okay.
I think that left guard should be their biggest want. And I'll defend the position there. Number one, they spent a lot on the interior. I think they were very embarrassed about what happened in the playoffs with the offensive line. I think they want everything to help J.J. McCarthy that they can possibly put on the football field. And also, they have spent a lot on the defensive side. To get Dallas Turner, a lot of draft capital, tons of money. Byron Murphy coming back last year, Van Ginkel, Grenard. Look at the defensive tackle investment. I'm sure Kevin O'Connell's sitting up there being like, hey,
I want some love.
Right, toss me something. And I think that maybe at the owners' meetings, he may have dispelled them looking at a wide receiver, or maybe he's playing 3D chess with us. I'm not sure. But I think that is the biggest need. I don't think that having Blake Brandel there long-term is an option, and they want to have a great offensive line, not a good offensive line. Do you agree or disagree?
Yes, no, for sure. I think they definitely do need someone at guard. I think I've gone back and forth with should they go after another veteran on that side and get someone older like they did with Fries and Kelly, or do they get Tyler Booker and just hope that his talent is enough that he can be a rookie that makes an impact on the offensive line? I think it's harder to do at an offensive line position or a defensive line, but not impossible.
I totally agree, and that is a little bit of the risk of guard going first, is that we've not seen a ton of guards just step in and be difference makers. But even then, even if he's above average right away, that's much better than they had last year with Blake Brandel in the top 5 in pressures allowed. What would be, so if we take left guard number 1, and I've probably switched this list 5 different times during draft season, what would you take as number 2 for their biggest need?
You mentioned Malachi Starks. I think safety is pretty high on the list, even with Harrison Smith returning, Josh Metellus returning. Metellus is only on contract for another year. They're going to have to renegotiate that next offseason. Harrison Smith, Kwesi said it in there, there's very soon going to come a time where Kevin and Kwesi do not have Harrison Smith in the locker room guiding them along, acting as their veteran leader. And I think it's better to get someone now that can learn from him alongside Metellus and also Theo Jackson, who's obviously been in the locker room a little bit already. Get someone now who can learn from Smith and those other guys so that when Smith leaves, whether it be at the end of this season or he plays another 2-3 seasons, I feel like we don't know at this point. It's just going to be a guessing game every year. I think get it now. There's good safeties in this class. Starks, I really like South Carolina's Nick Eamon-Wari. He might go higher than the Vikings are able to get him, but that would be my pick, I think.
So here's my one question about the safety position, and it is going to be something I bring up all the time now because we are looking for any straws to grasp onto. But when we talk about the scarcity, this offseason we saw Cam Bynum become a free agent. Somebody got him, Justin Reed, Javon Holland. There was a lot of safeties. Trayvon Morig was another one that was open in the free agent market. There's a lot of safeties that come available in free agency. And that might shape their decision-making there to say, well, when Harrison Smith retires, we could just sign somebody else. And now they're downright cocky about being able to sign whoever they want, right? They've had so many guys come in that were targets of theirs that we'll just sign the biggest safety. That's the one holdup. I think Starks is a Harrison Smith-like player, and that could be intriguing. The next one is hard, though, for me because is it defensive tackle, corner, or do I start selling wide receiver again? I think
or tight end.
Okay, so we need to get into the tight end thing. I get asked about it a lot, and you seem to think it's a need. You asked the question, but Kwesi's like, and I was like, why is tight end a need to you? Is it because they brought in your guy, Aronde Gadsden Jr.?
No, I mean, I think Kwesi's right that it's a champagne problem of a need. Like it's not a need, it is a want. You want a third tight end in that room. I think the fact that Hawkinson maybe didn't quite look entirely himself back from injury last year. Josh Oliver was also injured last year. Like, you want a third body in there. And, like, I don't know who you would get if you're just picking someone up kind of random down the line. So, like, I wouldn't hate to see them maybe use, like, their 5th rounder, or if they acquire other capital on a tight end who I think it needs to be a receiving tight end. It needs to be someone who can go over the middle and catch things out of the slot and be that big guy that you wanted Hawkinson to be in those late games last year, and he just wasn't. I can't remember if it was the Lions or the Rams game where we really saw him struggle in that capacity. So you want someone there, I think, behind them for similar reasons to Smith, learning from both of them for whenever they decide to leave or the Vikings don't re-sign them. I think Oliver's in a contract year as well.
Correct,
so
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not like high on it, but I think it is sneakily more there than we'd like to think.
So it is interesting because now when you first brought up, I thought, wait, first round? Or,
No,
okay,
no.
That's a little much. But I have been asked about that, whether they would do something like that. Then my answer is no. But not when they just, not that long ago, made TJ Hawkinson the most expensive tight end in football.
That's true.
But they have had a history in the past of drafting guys in the 5th round and then developing them. And I think we see this all around the NFL with the tight end position and they lost Nick Muse to the Eagles that picked him up.
And Johnny Munt.
Yes, and Johnny Munt. And a lot of times, though, those tight ends, they take 2 or 3 years. Even the top ones, even a TJ Hawkinson was not who he was. So you have to look a little down the road with that position. Unlike a running back, when you need one, you draft one because that guy will come in and play right away. So down the road, if you've developed somebody for 2-3 years, and then we get to the point where Hawkinson is maybe not performed at that level, or you need a tight end too that isn't expensive, like Josh Oliver for a second tight end, that I'm buying. But when you first said it, I was like,
not the first round. No.
Okay, you're not new enough to have not seen the depth chart. But now that your explanation, I agree. But if we're going first round, I think I would put, or is it your turn?
No, it's your turn.
It's my turn. Okay, so you had guard and then safety. I think I would put defensive tackle here.
Okay.
Or corner.
Yeah, I would go either way too. So we can discuss both, I feel like.
Well, here's what I love about defensive tackle is that, talk about scarcity, it is the most scarce position. I mean, it is impossible almost to find a defensive tackle in free agency. That's how Milton Williams gets $26 million a year, because he's the only option out there. The Vikings got 2 defensive tackles in free agency who were good and now are older and still very expensive. I mean, normally, how much would you pay for a Jonathan Allen at another position? A guy whose play had regressed and who is over 30 years old and had a major injury last year. If that's a tight end, if that's a wide receiver, if that's a corner, you're not paying top dollar. But pass rushing defensive tackle, you are. That would be part of the math. The other part is, too, I love positions where you don't have to rely on the guy, but you can also use him. And so if you draft Derek Harmon, he can play 450 snaps, get 30 pressures, 4 sacks or something, and you're like, that's great, and then develop for a couple of years.
That's a good point. That last point, I think I agree with that. That's probably one of the easiest positions among their need, where they can take the guy and then know that he's not having to play all the time, but is still getting enough play that he can develop, which I think is maybe some of the issue you run into with, like, okay, well, if you draft a cornerback, how much is that cornerback going to play this year versus going to be sitting on the sideline, not getting much action? It's probably the same with safety, though I think I'd still keep that as my top pick. Defensive tackle does feel like the one where you get the most rotation in.
So would you go corner next then?
Yes. Yeah.
Let's talk about corner. At the owners' meetings, Kevin O'Connell revealed to us, big reveal, that Brian Flores was behind the Isaiah Rodgers pickup.
Surprise.
Now, we have almost made Brian Flores into some sort of mythological genius, and he's earned that, I think. I think he has. When he loves a player like Josh Metellus or Cam Bynum or somebody else that he sees and elevates that player, it usually works out. Ivan Pace is probably the most ludicrous example of someone who is an undrafted free agent who's the same height as you. And they were like, this guy's going to be like starting, and then he's really good. But are we making too much of his Isaiah Rodgers love? I'm sure that he hasn't been right on every single player of all time. Or do you think that spot at corner is going to be mostly full just for 2025?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, the Isaiah Rodgers stuff at owners' meetings, which I was listening to from afar because I wasn't in Florida, which was a bummer. But
so you didn't see me and Ben podcasting from inside of a bush?
I didn't see that, actually.
We got kicked out of a really good podcast spot, and I didn't bring my hat. And so we had to move to in the bushes, and the sun was peering through and burning my retinas and my fair skin, and it was kind of a disaster. Great pod, though. But we did talk a lot about Isaiah Rodgers in that one. And I think that was one of the statements that popped the most from that entire conversation with KOC.
Yeah, that and the Jordan Mason endorsement, which we had kind of understood just from talking to Jordan Mason, I think, why they brought him in, but further endorsement there. But yeah, Isaiah Rodgers is interesting, right? I mean, like, they kind of, it's just like a maybe slightly younger, if I'm remembering ages correctly, replacement of Stephon Gilmore, whose contract voided, and we don't really know if he's going to come back for another year at this point anywhere.
It's probably nice of you to say slightly younger, but yes.
Okay.
How old is, I think he was maybe 34, 35, and Rodgers is 27.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry, Isaiah. Yeah. So you get a younger guy in there alongside. So they're the same age, him and Murphy. This is why I need to read the bios closer. I don't know. I mean, I don't know much about Mekhi Blackmon, obviously, because he was hurt before I got here. I haven't seen him play, haven't seen him in training camp or anything like that. I had been really high on cornerback, and I think if you get the right cornerback, it could be interesting because there are some really versatile guys in this draft class who, if you draft them and maybe they're a cornerback, you could easily switch them over to safety and maybe be addressing both needs at once. But the thing is, I think most of those guys are going to be first round or early second round guys. So it's really going to depend on if they're available at number 24 or later to the Vikings, and whether you go for that there versus the defensive tackle, if Harmon's still available, or a guard, if Zabel or Booker is still available, whatever. So yeah, cornerback's an interesting one. I've been becoming less sold on it in terms of like how high it is on the list. But it would not surprise me either if that's where they go in the first round.
So specifically, Jahdae Barron is somebody I think you had in mind when you're talking about versatility. And if he does not get taken really high, which he could, we don't know how it's going to play out. I see in mock drafts, some people have him going to the Vikings, like Dane Brugler the other day, and in some mocks, he's going like 12th.
Yeah.
So this is the uncertainty of this draft, which I think is very high. Once you get past maybe the top 8 picks, you could see teams having wild differences in opinion. But I think that it's player specific for corner. That if it's a Jahdae Barron, I also like Trey Amos, the corner from Ole Miss, as somebody who's very experienced and I think kind of matches their profile as a zone type of corner. But if it's not somebody that is going to fit that bill of a potential game changer, that's a position to me that you could trade down and get.
Yeah.
Where we see a bunch of guys. Siobhan Ravel is super interesting, and they had him in for a visit. This is what I really like about this Vikings draft is there's just so many guys that they could potentially pick that it's made it a lot of fun to talk about. I mean, not that I didn't enjoy the quarterback conversation last year where there were 5 or maybe 6. It was more like 4 because they weren't getting Caleb Williams, but everything else was kind of on the table. So 4 or 5, but there's just a lot. Now, what's the wild card after that? I know what it is for me. Everybody knows what it is for me. KOC even knows what it is for me, which is wide receiver as the next need after that down the board. Would that be it for you, or would it be running back? Would it even be potentially? I mean, we talk about Ivan Pace, but there's no guarantee that he's locked in as the forever linebacker. Running back, you could have edge rusher would be a very big reach. I think it would be a stretch.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't actually know if you agree or not with my take that they should draft a receiver.
I think it would be receiver or tight end. And again, I want a receiving tight end in there. Before free agency, I would have told you running back. But I think now that we've heard from Mason himself. We've heard what they think of Mason, kind of heard how that dynamic with Aaron Jones is going to go. I think they're set on those two. And if they pick up anyone else, it would be like an undrafted free agent or something like that. So yeah, I think you need to add to that receiving core and get another threat in there, alongside obviously Jefferson and then Addison, who might miss some time this year. We're not sure yet. And then obviously the other guys. I think you want a more, I'm trying to think of the best adjective here. Not secure, that's the first one that comes to mind, but like just someone that you can rely on a little bit more to take that weight when Jefferson's double teamed, as it felt like we were talking about every single post-game press conference or Monday press conference last year.
Yeah, I mean, with Jalen Naylor, it's not that I would be down at all on Jalen Naylor, and Kevin O'Connell has talked positively about him for, years, but also at the owners' meetings, he said, hey, he did a good job when Addison was out. But then the next man up after that right now is Rondale Moore. We don't even know if he's going to make the team. Like, we don't know where he is physically. KOC suggested that there might be some time missed for minicamp. His injury last year was horrific when he was with the Atlanta Falcons. So if that's your depth, and a guy named Tim Jones, who they brought in, who was a special teamer from Jacksonville, there needs to be somebody else there. I think more likely it's middle round that they would go, and there's a lot of intriguing middle round wide receivers. I will continue to bang the drum that if you are considering down the road that Jordan Addison will have to get paid at some point, and what that player can bring J.J. McCarthy right now, do the Brian Windhorst, I really love it. Running back, though, this draft is supposed to be so deep that I think undrafted free agent does make the most sense with running back.
Yeah, it's a class with the running backs where like you could get a guy who you could have argued could go in the 3rd round in the 6th round. And so it's just kind of like, why would you waste the capital on that when you already have your 1-2 punch set, seemingly? Of course, it's good to have a 3rd person in there, or a 4th person, because I guess you do have a 3rd person with Ty Chandler. But it can definitely be found in those days after the draft to me.
And we saw how they feel about Ty Chandler just by the usage last year. It was pretty clear they don't really trust him to be on the field too much. And maybe there's a 5th round argument for a running back, because this year that guy might be the equivalent of a normal 3rd round pick, just considering how many good ones there really are. Circling back to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's press conference, there was one small piece of news, just one, and it's just small, but people love talking about that backup quarterback. They just love it. It doesn't matter, but they love it. At least it doesn't to me. He said that the compensation formula, again, what are we doing here, is not the only reason that they have not.
Yeah.
Now, I immediately thought of like really funny reasons, like, Carson Wentz is still stuck in traffic, or he's hunting, they can't get a hold of him or something. Like, what would the other reason be? Maybe money, negotiating with somebody named Carson Wentz. We're running out of people here.
Yeah.
And I got to give Alec his props for every time a backup quarterback signs, he tweets out the thing from, is it Happy Gilmore or is it Billy Madison? Where the guy crosses people off the list. I cannot remember which movie that's from. But there's not a lot of guys left to look at, so maybe a holdup could be a potential trade. Aiden O'Connell, the quarterback from the Raiders, is allegedly on the trade block. What do we think the holdup is here?
Yeah, I don't know. Joe Flacco went off the board, and I was like, oops, that's not great for them. They're trying to get a veteran. And then like Drew Lock went back to Seattle, and he was one of the guys that I was like, okay, if you're like looking for someone maybe like Darnold or Jones-esque, not quite that caliber, but a guy who's been in the league a few years, like he fits that bill. More names going off the board. I think it's probably mostly the comp pick formula, and he just didn't want too much attention on that. I think a trade's an interesting consideration. I don't know that I would necessarily love to trade for Aiden O'Connell, I guess it depends on what the Vikings would be sending. They can't send draft picks at this point. I think they need to lay off on that maybe for a little bit, but that's
7th round pick swap. How about that?
7th round pick swap in 2027 or whatever they want to do to get Aiden O'Connell out here. But yeah, certainly interesting. And my thing is too, like, both Kwesi and Kevin talked all year last year about how much they loved having 5 quarterbacks in the room. They have 2 quarterbacks in the room right now. So if they're looking to get to 5, like, we need to get a move on. Like, otherwise the other 3 are going to be guys that you don't trust to play at all behind a guy that you do trust but haven't seen play. And so, yeah, I'm very interested. I still think as soon as that 3 p.m. deadline hits on the Monday after and the calendar flips or whatever, that we'll see someone come in pretty quickly.
Okay, I've got it. Carson Wentz went up in a hot air balloon. And he doesn't get any service up there. But then the hot air balloon, it kind of got like caught in the wind. And so he's just floating up in the air. And as soon as they track him down and get him to the ground, he'll be the Vikings backup quarterback. That could be the other thing that's holding him up.
Or he was on he was piloting the space flight that the women went on the other day. Because he's an ally.
Wait, oh yeah, okay, he's got to be now. I was going to say, like, is there a woman pilot? I haven't paid attention.
No, I don't know.
Or is it just, it's a regular astronaut, but just women are the only ones that
It probably was, like, remoted from the ground, I would guess.
Oh, okay.
I would guess.
By a woman, though, maybe. I haven't looked into the details of that, but I hope they're having a good time up there.
Oh, they're back.
Okay, I hope they had a good time when they were up there. So, all right, let me, we've been playing a game on the show recently with guests where I had a bunch of fans fill in the sentence, am I crazy for thinking blank? Okay. So I think that your first am I crazy would be for obsessing over 5th round tight ends. That's you get it on this show. If you say something super football-y, I'm like, you get a neck roll for that. Mm-hmm. And that might not hit as well as it does for somebody my age when players used to wear neck rolls, but you're at least aware.
I'm aware of neck rolls.
Okay. Yeah. Here's something. The modern neck roll is kind of subtle.
It's very short.
CJ Ham said to me last year, he's like, hey, I wore a neck roll in the last game. Did you see it? And I was like, I couldn't tell, man. No. He's like, well, it kind of goes under it. I'm like, no.
It's not a real neck roll.
Doesn't
when they
count.
used to have like a back pad flap at the top of their
That's a neck roll. So you get a neck roll for loving the 5th round tight end conversation. But what opinion have you had this offseason where you wanna cross check it? Am I crazy for thinking?
Oh boy.
What?
Ooh. Am I crazy for thinking?
You want me to fire one at you first?
Yeah.
Am I crazy for thinking that there are going to be a lot of teams in the NFL who really regret not going and getting Sam Darnold this year? And maybe one of them is here.
Ooh.
Oh, I had to make it spicy.
I was going to say the first part I was like all in on. I was like, no, you're not crazy, because I think we're seeing that there is some hesitancy around this quarterback draft class, even more than there was 6 weeks ago, I think. The second part, maybe a little crazy, but I understand.
I wanted to give you the real crazy. Well, so we moved past that conversation so fast because Aaron Rodgers showed up at our doorstep. And as we record this, he's apparently going on McAfee. I don't even want to know. It's not our problem anymore.
Don't tell me.
McAfee's problem. But I do think that there is a very real universe where Sam Darnold in one of the weaker divisions in football, I think that's fair, right? San Francisco's tearing down. Arizona's okay. The Rams are good, but we don't know how much longer Stafford is going to be a really good quarterback. He did regress, except against the Vikings last year. And Seattle's got a pretty good roster. Maybe they could make the playoffs. If the Vikings do not make the playoffs because there's bumps along the road for McCarthy, or the older players that they signed that spend all that money on do not come to fruition, that they could be saying, well, maybe one more year of Darnold would have been what J.J. McCarthy needed. I think the point of the Am I Crazy is there is so much confidence in J.J. McCarthy to make this move alone, to not franchise tag Sam Darnold or to try to work out a contract with him, that anytime anything is super confident in the NFL, I'm always like, is that going to work? And I've been, an advocate of the move, but I think we do have to at least ask, like, is that going to work? Am I crazy for wondering if Sam Darnold's in the playoffs and the Vikings aren't? There's a twist for you. See, that's how you do it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. I'll go.
You can say yes, by the way. The point is to be crazy.
Am I crazy for thinking that the NFC North is going to be more competitive than it was this past season?
More competitive
within itself.
In a way that, the records are not as good as they were, and they're fighting for playoff spots.
Yeah.
I think you're not crazy at all for thinking that, even though the Bears got much better and, the Packers haven't really got better. They just think because they're them that they'll be fine. And best of luck to them on that. I think that every team in the NFC North is going to regress by their record because of who they're playing and their schedule. The schedules are hard. The Vikings might have to go to Ireland or something. I haven't heard anything. I'm just saying it's possible.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Oh, you want to go?
I would love to go to Ireland. You wouldn't?
Well, my problem
No
is
Taco Bell over there?
What I want, I want to go. See, she's been around long enough to know enough about how much I eat Taco Bell, but had some last night actually. I want to go to Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh is a cool environment.
It's just the best.
Yeah.
It's a great city.
And I haven't seen, so sorry, we're getting into college football realm temporarily on the Pittsburgh conversation, but a Pitt game, I don't think will hold a candle to Steelers game. But the venue is so cool that I'm like, I want to see the Steelers in their home venue. So
I love the city too.
I understand that.
I mean, you were living in central New York before you came here. I'm from western New York. It's not that far of a trip down to Pittsburgh.
No.
I used to go all the time for baseball games and stuff. It's beautiful. So I don't really want to go to Ireland because then you lose that game. But the point is that I do think that it will be harder in the NFC North. And it could be very, very close. Last year, we're talking about a division that was the Lions and the Vikings, and then there's a gap, and then there's the Packers, and, of course, the Bears, LOL. But do people do that now? Do younger kids say LOL for something? No, not really.
I do, but there's people even younger than me now. I'm starting to feel old, so I don't know how you all feel in there.
Yeah. Well, just you accept it long ago when you moved out. When you're like, this guy who's coming out, his dad was an amazing player. With Deion Sanders, you guys don't understand how good Deion was. And you're like, yeah, Deion's 60. Anyway. I think that it will be closer because Ben Johnson should elevate the Bears.
Yeah, that's my thinking.
I just don't see the Packers as being a lot different unless they do something soon. Signing Aaron Banks is just not enough to change my mind. And losing Ben Johnson has to be relevant, and Aaron Glenn. There should be nobody happier in the world for Ben Johnson to not be with Detroit anymore than the people inside this building. Even though he's in Chicago, the amount of talent that he had to work with there, and he just had the answers for Brian Flores, but only with that talent. I don't know he's going to have all the answers with Chicago, but I do think they'll be better. I could see a scenario where the winner of the division gets 11 and the loser of the division gets 8.
I think the ceiling lowers and the floor raises.
I think so.
With the Bears coming up, and then the Lions having to deal with all their coaching departures, and the Vikings having to deal with a basically rookie quarterback.
Am I crazy for thinking that the best signing of the offseason might just happen to be Jordan Mason when we get to the end? This is what I mean. It's got to be kind of crazy, but then also defendable to fit the bill. Could that end up being at the end of the year we go, you know who was the best signing? It was actually Jordan Mason. You could say I'm crazy. It's allowed on the show.
I think yes. I think that's a little crazy. I don't think it's going to be clear enough. I think he will look good. I don't think it's going to be a definitive he's the best.
Okay, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that not only does Jordan Mason impact them in short yardage, where they were absolutely atrocious last year, but I also think that he gives us the best remaining version of Aaron Jones, because Aaron Jones will not have to carry the ball 250 times again. More fresh Aaron Jones. Fresh Aaron Jones, before he got banged up against the Jets, was averaging like 5 yards a carry. Fresh Aaron Jones is really good in the past. So not only does he help them get 3rd down and 1, which they seem to love to throw down the field on 3rd down and 1, but now the only caveat is they have to commit to actually running with someone, and that I'm not entirely convinced. But at very least, I think he can score touchdowns at the goal line, which they struggled.
That's true.
And that's going to be really valuable. And I just think he has a trickle-down effect that goes beyond just your fantasy statistics.
I think he'll be a popular fantasy pick, though.
Oh, he will. Yeah. He's going to score touchdowns. So, okay, so who do you think it's going to be then? If you're going to say, if you're going to come on my show.
Hey, you said I could disagree with you.
Yeah, I didn't mean it.
I think my thing is I don't think like anyone's going to be above like the rest in terms of like this guy was definitively their best signing. Like I think everyone that they've signed fills a very specific need with a very specific purpose. Like bringing in Fries and Kelly, like that is going to be very impactful and like help the offensive line a ton in ways I think we will very tangibly see. Murphy, the Murphy re-signing and extension, like that is something they needed in that secondary. Smith returning, that's something they needed in that secondary. I guess signing, and then the defensive tackles, I was like, I'm missing someone. I think the defensive tackles, that would maybe be where I'm like, okay, we'll see like how impactful, but between the offensive line and Mason, I think those are going to be very equal. Like, okay, these are equal signings.
That seems like a newspaper person cop-out. That's
Maybe.
Well, everybody's got their own role. What are you, Kwesi, at the podium there? Well, everyone's going to play their own role.
Everyone's going to play their own role.
Yeah. Look, there's plenty of PR companies that
we'll get more hot takey the farther we get. How about
you pick one person that you think is going to be the most impactful?
Okay. I'll go Fries.
Okay. I like that pick. I mean, the running game alone.
Yes.
Even if he's just above average in pass protection, I mean, his numbers previously are pretty good, but not amazing. But the run game, I mean, they just need to figure out with J.J. McCarthy as their quarterback how to be able to lean on a run game, and he's huge for that.
Right. Well, and I mean, we talked about it at the top when you picked guard as the position they maybe need most in the draft. Like, they signed Kelly first, and I was like, okay, like a center's a good pickup when you need interior offensive line help, but I'd really like for them to bring in a guard too. And so I think just him being an anchor there, like even if they don't take a guard in the draft, which that's probably going to happen, but if they weren't, like I would even feel better about Brendel on the other side just because they filled in with Fries and Kelly in the middle.
Okay, one more question. Since you don't really want to be definitive too much on this show, who are they picking? Who are they picking?
At number 24?
Sure. First person picked. It doesn't matter if it's 24 or they trade down. They will pick someone with their first selection. Don't be wrong or you're never coming back.
I know. If he's available, I think it needs to be Jahdae Barron.
Okay. I like that pick.
I just think he's such a fit for Flores' defense. I remember being at the combine and kind of just milling around as guys were at the podium and like stopping and listening to him and being like, oh, this is a Brian Flores defender. I think he would fit right in with everyone on the defense. He can play all across the field, which we know Brian likes to do with his secondary in particular. I mean, think of Josh Metellus practically playing linebacker a ton last year and having to switch around. So like if he is available, like that feels like a no-brainer to me. And then you get into the trenches and try and get a guard in your next pick, which maybe they can trade up or if they're using their 24th pick, trade back or trade up, I guess would be the correct term. But yeah, Jahdae Barron, he's the one I'm highest on, I think.
I like it. I think he's a Byron Murphy. I think they're very similar players. That player usually doesn't go incredibly high in the first. So I think the outside world is a little bit too high on him in a lot of the mocks. And there's a good chance of him being a long-term game changer. And I totally agree that I wasn't standing there, but I think I listened to it later, Barron at the Combine. You're like, yeah, you go into this locker room and I'm sure this was an observation of yours last year, and there's like 15 guys that if you stand there and listen to them, you get smarter about football.
Oh, yeah.
And that's who they look for on this team, great communicators, and he's one of them. So here's my last question. So you moved here in the middle of the season last year from covering Syracuse. You're originally from the Pacific Northwest. I know how challenging that is to drop in at the last minute. I luckily at least had one preseason game, but it was pretty much out of the frying pan and into the fire for me in 2016. What was your experience like last year, moving here, jumping into the middle of a 14-win season? O'Connell, you're coming in with a bunch of old guys who talk about neck rolls and stuff. What was that like for you last year?
I think it's good context to know that the first NFL game I ever covered was I helped out with the Bills' playoff loss to the Chiefs at the end of the 2023 season. And as I'm sure you can imagine, one of the most depressed spaces I've ever been in. The locker room was beside itself. I was watching players just sit and stare into space like they'd lost half their family or something like that. And so like to have that as my first, like, okay, you need to go in and get the story. Like, we've got things to tell in the locker room, I think made coming here and coming into the locker room in the middle of a winning season when everyone's in high spirits and stuff like that a lot easier. I didn't run into any. I think everyone's very welcoming. I mean, remember one of the first people I got introduced to was Cam Bynum, who of course isn't here anymore, but was the guy for kind of the whole season in terms of virality and viral moments and stuff like that. So it was definitely difficult. I'm excited to get through. I only have like a couple more things left before it feels like I've made it through everything once, which feels like it will make me feel a lot more secure about like, okay, the season's almost here. Like, we got to get through OTAs, got to get through training camp. And then it's like, I can do game coverage all year long, baby.
Well, one thing that you really got introduced to is how crazy it is around here.
Yes.
It can never be normal. Not ever. Not a single season. Not a single time. I have not had a normal one yet, and I don't expect I ever will. So last year you get a team that was supposed to win 6 games or 7 games,
right,
that wins 14, that then is going to get rid of its quarterback, which is weird enough. You get a playoff game that gets moved,
right,
which has never happened before since, I don't know, 1923 or something. And then you get the classic Vikings meltdown in the playoffs, which is just a motif that they have repeated time and time and time again. And I said to you in Glendale, I said, welcome to the beat. You're not here until you have seen this happen to this football team. And you talk about devastated. That locker room was pretty crushed.
Yeah.
So you were prepared for that. But I will say it is a great beat to be on. It's a great media market. The people are friendly. They're friendlier than New Yorkers are, I think. I can say that definitively. And it is a great franchise. I think we are as blessed as it comes to cover this franchise with the head coach that we follow around every day, the type of players that they have here, and the snacks are pretty good too. So we're in a good spot.
The snacks are pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty, as long as they're not expired, which happens sometimes. But I won't complain. Anyway, Emily Leiker, you are now, I'm going to call you the host of the All Access podcast with the Star Tribune, doing a tremendous job there. I think you've assimilated yourself really nicely, and we'll work on turning up the dial on the takes. This won't be your first time.
We had to get through the first one, and now I can be spicier, I think.
The next time you'll know. I better be ready with something crazy, and we'll be prepared for that. So follow Emily on, I don't know, whatever social media everybody's using now. It used to be easier. Now it's harder. But I'm sure she's there. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the Minnesota Star Tribune. So thank you again, Emily. This was really fun, and we will talk to you all very soon. Now, usually at the end of the show, Emily, I say football. Because you want to try it, you can.
Football.